So what we're dealing with today on a Sunday is we're going to go visit some property which deemed just on the outskirts of downtown Nassau. Nassau is a city, even though we're on an island, but Nassau is a city with a lot of island characteristics. Real estate downtown is the most expensive real estate in the Bahamas. So what's happening is there's a big dynamic shift that's taking place downtown with the announcement of a company called Global Ports. And Global Ports has agreed to invest $250 million to redevelop an area that's been in need of improvements for a very long time. We get the world's largest cruise ships in our port maybe 3 days a week. That is huge. That is huge money. Volumes of people. We get over 5 million people visiting this little island 21/7 a year. We have a population of 400,000 people spread over 700 islands. On any given day, we'll have the largest cruise ships here. So what's happening is, going back to the story, Global Port announces $250 million. Whenever you see that type of an investment in a single location, all surrounding properties are going to be positively impacted. Investors look for opportunity. We're going to go and explore. An investor has asked me to explore opportunities on his behalf for properties that have been sitting dormant for a long time. All of these properties are all unique in their own way. They all have challenges. They have challenges about location, accessibility, condition, title, generation, and most important, sales price. Biggest problem that we're going to have really is convincing sellers about what their properties are worth, given the announcement of Global Ports. So we're in the area that's called Parliament Square. This is where all the courts are, the House of Parliament, the government, the prison. Those are tourists. I don't know how you can tell. Is it either by their attire or by how they're moving? You know, most of the banks, offshore banks, have now moved out of downtown. They've all gone either west or east, just because it's congested. Any town, any city, you got traffic issues, parking issues, noise pollution, maybe some privacy issues. Offshore banks, when they deal with clients, is at a very high privacy, confidential level. And then the school systems. With the schools being on the outskirts and traffic sort of being a concern, it's easier to have offices on the outskirts of downtown. The Hilton to the west and ends at East Street to the east. That has been the heartbeat of Nassau. This is where most of the tourists, 5 million, come to do their shopping, to buy all their duty-free stuff, to have their Rolexes and their perfumes and their t-shirts in the store market, and the experience. They get to ride their horse and buggies, they get to have good meals. So this is the heart of town. Right behind us is where the cruise ships come in. So you'll see the tourists kind of flowing back in that way. What's happening is the cruise ships, when the passengers come, they go to the right. Nobody goes to the left. What's happening is now with the announcement of Global Ports, which is a $250 million improvement of the port, the interest has now starting to move to the east of East Street. And that's the property we're going to look at. I'm representing a client that wants me to amass properties for him to the east of East Street. Not a very easy thing to do, very complicated. Multiple owners, multiple egos, multiple title issues, multiple dealing with zoning, accessibilities, height restrictions, infrastructure, parking, a lot of dynamics going on there. And then most of all, people with inflated prices and people that don't want to sell. That's never an easy situation to get into. This property has been vacant, I would say probably about 15 years, not being able to be rented. There's nowhere to park, nobody comes to the left. So what do you do with something that's ran down and unoccupied like this? Now with Global Ports, the owner's mind is, boy, this thing is really worth a lot of money. And that's the problem we're going to face. PR person just called. We have an important story that we wrote about that she wants to publish tomorrow. And let me try to remember what the story is about. So I wrote a story about, because of the hurricane and because we have 11,000 people that's been displaced for housing, Nassau does not have inventory to take on all of those people. The demand for affordable rentals cannot be met due to Hurricane Doreen. We do not have the inventory. What we do have is inventory of bank foreclosed properties. Banks have been sitting on maybe 5,000 homes here in Nassau that they cannot sell. They've been foreclosed on and they're just sitting there. Why don't the property sell? Because the cost of the transaction, the cost to renovate, is too high for an investor based on the rent that they can get. If the government in this time of need reduces the cost, waive their cost of transaction, waive the cost of importing the materials to do the renovations, have the subsidiary rental that's coming through the donations for people to live, investors will buy houses in bulk and they'll buy these foreclosed properties, get them off the bank's books, and then they'll be available for people to rent, because you cannot build new inventory. So that's what the article is about. Don't look like much now, but this property is worth a lot of money. We do very little manufacturing in the Bahamas. So this property, one time, these were the ports. These were all of the cargo, cars, everything came in. The government required that these guys shut down and relocate the port to an island called Arawak, which is probably about 2 miles from here. So now, what is the highest and best use for this property? The highest and best use for this property, and I've advocated over and over again with the government, and one day they'll listen, is that Nassau needs a skyline. We need to build high-rise buildings on this very expensive, beautiful harborfront property, like almost every city in the world. We need to realize that we are in a city environment. We're no longer just an island. So the problem with this property is, how high can you go? Okay, so I got a message here today. I represent a master plan development in West End, Grand Bahama. You know, Hurricane Doreen just hit Grand Bahama. And people are asking me, how did the property do? And the property actually did very well. The engineering, the infrastructure was very well built, so the property was not damaged. The original developer, Ginsumir, spent over 500 million developing this property. I have it on the market for 60 million, and I have a buyer. So the buyer messaged me to ask me, first, how did the property survive, which is positive, and second, how long would it take for investors to want to buy property in Grand Bahama? What are the risks of investing now? How long will it take for people to buy homes at the West End? I don't have a crystal ball, but in my knowledge, I would say there's a couple of things going on. One is that the Bahamas is now known globally in no way has ever been known before. The Bahamas itself. Even though it's the hurricane, but the world now knows about the Bahamas. I think in the long run that's going to be very positive. When you see money going into an area, which we're going to see a lot of money going into redevelopment, into home construction, and whenever you see a lot of money going into somewhere, there's a positive spin-off, however long it takes or when it takes it, but it will happen. Back in the day, this was the thriving part of the Nassau economy before shopping malls. So this is where everybody would come to shop. The people would come on their sailboats or mail boats. This is before flights were popular, and come downtown and get all their supplies, put them back on the boats and go back to the island. Then at one time, this was a two-way street. You had sidewalk parking where people were able to go to the stores. But now we've got malls, we got cans, we got dirt, we got boarded up properties, and we have stores that just don't function anymore.
It's just nasty.
It's terrible. It is terrible. And this is like we're like, you can't even rent this building, and within 200 feet, you're going to pay $100 a square foot for rent. Location, location, location. A building like this, of all these buildings, this would probably be the most challenged to deal with because it's deemed a historical building. This was probably used as an old sponge facility when sponging was very popular in the 1920s. You won't be able to demolish this building. You will have to be able to build on it, use the exterior walls, and when you renovate it, according to the antiquities, you're going to have to keep a certain percentage of the original construction in order to renovate. Very tricky property, that one. And that's why sometimes these properties are just sitting there, because the cost to renovate, to improve it, is just too much. Yeah, so today was a good day to get out here on a Sunday. It's not so crowded, a little bit less people. But we did accomplish a lot today. And then what we did is we came up with a game plan. So the game plan now is, I know I've got to meet with some government officials, because I got to get some zoning things sorted out, especially the building heights. I know I have to make some phone calls. My team will start calling people. You know, we're going to get some pushback. People are going to want to sell. Some might just want to rent. But for those that want to sell, and then I need to nail down my client to make sure we have our agreement in place, my buyer's agency agreement, so I can get paid, because this is all about him. It's a huge undertaking. It's not an easy undertaking. We got probably 20 different owners, everybody with a different personality, everybody with a different need or position, and we're going to just have to work through that. It's not going to be easy. It's a lot of work, but there's a lot of money. I'm talking probably $60 million worth of sales right there. $60 million times whatever commission makes a big payday. That's a good motivator. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a blast to share with you guys, because again, you get to share how we do things in the Bahamas. I figure in about 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to be in a solid position to share that information and do another shoot and share some success stories. That's what it's all about. If we're not successful, we don't get paid. Commission brokers, we work on commission only. If we don't sign the contract, we don't make no money. If we're not in it for that, that's a waste of time.